I'm just gonna wait till about like 6:10 to get started to give everyone a chance to join. Oh, for the people that are new, we're just waiting a few minutes so that everyone can join. So I'm going to start around 6:10. All right, I think we're all set to get started. Pretty much everyone has joined. So just to start off, if you are not a panelist or a host or anything, would you mind please muting yourself? You can keep your camera on or off, whatever you prefer, but just mute yourself throughout the meeting. A little bit of structure for the event. So about the first hour until around 7 o'clock, we're going to be asking questions to the panelists for you all to listen to. And then afterwards, we'll open it up to any questions that you may have. And I'll let you know when. And I would like you all to send your questions into the chat, and then I'll read them off from there. So yeah, let's get started. My name is Janu. I'm a third-year transfer student at UCLA. I'm an econ major and hoping to go into investment banking after I graduate. And for the Bruin Transfers and Business Club, I'm the director of professional events. So this is a 3-week panel for career discovery. Our first week, of course, today is focused towards finance. Next week at the same time is going to be focused towards consulting. And the third week is focused toward the product tech industry. So it's a great opportunity to hear from successful Bruin alumni like we have here today, and to get any advice or answer any questions that you might have to help your experience at UCLA, especially as a transfer. So I'm just going to hand it over to our panelists to give a little intro of themselves. First, we have Bhargavi, if you want to get started.
Yeah, sure, I could get started. So yeah, my name's Bhargavi. I am a recent graduate of UCLA. I graduated in 2020, so had a virtual graduation, which is fun. I was an econ major, and I currently work at Intel as an OpEx spending analyst, part of the corporate planning and reporting team. My favorite UCLA memory, I would say, was during finals time. My friends and I decided to watch the sunrise at Royce, and we just talked for hours, and it was really fun. I miss college a lot because of it. But yeah, that's me.
All right, Arvin, you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. So, hey guys, my name's Arvin Shaughnessy. I was a math econ major at UCLA, graduated in 2015. So I currently work at Antares Capital doing leverage finance, and we can talk a little bit more about what that is a little bit later. I'm sure we'll get into it. And favorite UCLA memory, probably not sanctioned by the commissioner, but definitely loved doing tunneling. It was a great experience.
All right, and Kyle, go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted. I think so. Let me see.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, perfect.
Cool. Hey guys, Kyle Carney. I'm a 2015-16 grad. I was 15 like Arvin, but pulled a victory lap and did 2 extra quarters. I majored in English while at UCLA. Did a bunch of the econ and accounting coursework, which I'm happy to speak to in terms of major. For anyone in humanities or non-traditional majors. I worked for an investment bank in Brentwood, just across the 405, called Intrepid, where I've been for about 5 years now. Favorite UCLA moment has to have been tied to probably athletics, UCLA football.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks for being here today. I know it's really helpful for the transfers because it can be intimidating with all of this going on. So I just wanted to also mention before I forget, if you could all follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay updated on any events we have like this in the future. You can find our mailing list as well as our social media at our website called bruintransfersandbusiness.com. So if you can go ahead and look that up after the meeting's over, that'd be great. So yeah, let's get into it. The first question I wanted to ask was, what was your guys' career path straight out of college that led you to the job that you're at? So Arvin, you want to start?
Yeah, happy to. I'll start actually with an internship. I know we might talk about this later, but I think for transfers, it's especially helpful given how hard it is to get an internship in general, but especially when you're coming in late. So I did an internship at a firm called Great American Group in the San Fernando Valley part of LA that did inventory appraisals to support a type of lending called asset-based lending. So I did that during my junior year summer. And coming out of that internship, I had the choice to return there or decide to recruit full-time. I decided to recruit full-time to, instead of providing a service that a lender would use to make a decision. I instead wanted to be, the person that ultimately ended up lending the capital, investing the capital. So did recruiting for a couple different avenues and ended up landing at JP Morgan Chase doing commercial banking. So that is lending money in the middle market space in my group's instance, primarily to support, buying new equipment, new factory, some acquisition financing, providing lines of credit to help companies draw money in times of need, that type of activity. So I did that for about 2 years, and then started to realize the type of transaction I like to work on the most were those that involved merger and acquisition activity, more specifically leverage buyouts, supporting private equity firms. So started to keep an eye out on what types of opportunities would allow me to do that, realizing that the skill set between commercial banking and the role that would support my goals were very similar. So began to look for opportunities outside of commercial banking, and ultimately landed at Antares Capital here in Los Angeles, which is a leverage finance provider, private credit, as the industry has now become known, depending on the type of firm you're at. And I've been there for about 3 years now. And yeah, should we discuss our day-to-day, or we'll get into that a little later. So I'll pause, and that's kind of the track of where, how I got to where I am now, yeah.
Okay, got it, thanks. All right, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd say my career progression has been probably less interesting for transfer since college, since I've stayed at the same firm since graduating. Intrepid was my first job out of college. But before that, I took a pretty unorthodox path, even beyond being a transfer. I kind of knew that I was going to community college before I was going to transfer. So I took a test in California called the High School Proficiency Exam and got my diploma early. Dropped out of high school in my junior year and started community college right around 15. So I went into community college, did 2.5 years there, and was involved on campus and tried to start kind of building my academic piece of my career at CC, Mount SAC, out in San Gabriel Valley, where I'm from, before transferring to UCLA. At that point, I think, common with a lot with consistent with what a lot of you guys are facing right now, it becomes basically an internship game, and trying to get internships on your resume to make you competitive against the 4-year students who've already had those opportunities early in their academia. And so I did a number of different internships in college. A couple like Arvin, I did one in commercial banking, one in commercial real estate, on the lending side. And then I did 2 in investment banking, one in Miami, just trying to get a flavor for different things before I ultimately joined Intrepid at an undergrad for, a number of reasons, but a lot of what I wanted in a career aligned with what the guys are doing at this shop. So, and I've been there ever since.
Nice. Okay, thanks. And Parkavi, if you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, so similar to Kyle, I had kind of an unorthodox path as well. I knew I was going to transfer before going to community college. I actually transferred a year early. So I, around the age 15, 16, I already started taking credits. So pretty much when I came to UCLA, I only had 1 real summer under my belt of college internships and experience and stuff like that. So that was a bit daunting, to be honest. Not having as much experience. I think a common transfer story is, these people have been here for 2 years and I just came in, how am I going to compete with these guys? And I definitely was in the same boat. And I also had an unorthodox path where I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do right when I entered in to UCLA. Actually, no, so I did. I wanted to go into corporate law, and that was kind of the path. So I was an econ major. I was like, okay, this is perfect. And then, I took business law my first quarter. I was shadowing a bunch of lawyers. All of them told me don't do law, which was the biggest red flag already. And then I pretty much decided after my first quarter, okay, no, corporate law, I don't want to do that. Let me explore what econ has to offer in the business sector. So I pretty much spent my junior year exploring, learning about different sectors, figuring out what I liked the best. And it wasn't until I interned in corporate finance at Intel my junior year that I really decided, I like this. And this is what I did a cost benefit analysis of what all the sectors had to offer and what I prioritize and value and what I needed in my career. And I found that in corporate finance, and I've been there. I decided to join for full time, and I joined pretty recently, so I can't say too much along those lines, but that's pretty much my path.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to kind of see where you want to go until you have an internship, until you're working in the field. You don't really know where you're at. So I feel like a lot of people change their mind around this time. Um, so I just wanted to ask, like, as a transfer, how did you navigate between, your professional life and your academic life? Because obviously, it's a huge shift going from community college to university level courses, while also focusing on recruitment and, applying for internships, all of that. So how did you kind of divide your time and figure out what to focus on? Arvin, you could go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And it's funny, like every time someone, mentored a few folks and talked with a few other transfers, and every time that someone asks that question, I just think back to like my first week on campus, and there was like, investment banking night, like Big Four night. And I'm like walking up to these booths and I'm hearing like, oh yeah, M&A market's hot right now. And I'm like Googling like, what the hell is going on right here? So it can definitely be overwhelming, and it's hard to, feel like you can balance things, especially in the first couple weeks and quarters at UCLA. But I'd say, definitely focus on your academics. That's got to be number one. With, for better or worse, GPA is a huge factor in employers considering you. So got to make sure you devote most of your energy, as you should be, to that. But outside of that, I would say, it is a lot of work to recruit and network, but you've got to put in that effort. Go to the information sessions, go to the Big Four night, the, consulting night, financial services night, meet people. Even if those opportunities don't amount to much, because, let's face it, there's a huge student body at UCLA, you at least start to get the reps in and understand how to talk to these professionals, maybe pick up some of the lingo, understand like, how to start up small talk, get more, proficient, less nervous about that. So again, I just in summary, I would say, again, academics number one, like get your GPA as good as a position it can be, but also, it's going to suck, especially, when it's hot out and you got to be walking to the career center whenever we're back on campus. But you got to put in the effort. It definitely makes a huge difference just in terms of getting that momentum.
Got it. Thanks. All right. Kyle, you wanted to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd say community college for me was all about clubs and connecting with students on campus and, leadership positions, extracurriculars, all that. By the time I got to UCLA, I think I realized early on I was behind the eight ball on internships. And so I never actually really got fully super invested into clubs on campus. I did a little bit, but I was pretty focused on networking and getting internships and experience. And one thing I think in light of the 2020 experience that everyone is going through in terms of recruiting right now, and a lot of you are probably thinking about, is taking an internship or taking time off or doing an extra time. I kind of did that as well in my college experience to make sure I could get the internships to get me to the ultimate job that I wanted. When I took 2 quarters off my senior year in 2015 and moved to Miami to work for Citigroup in some random internship I found on Bruin View at the time. I guess we have Handshake now, but Bruin View at the time, working in like Latin America investment banking, which nobody I knew in Miami, no friends out there or anything. But it was really fun. It was awesome. I moved out there. All my friends graduated without me in 2015, and then I did 2 extra quarters and came on in 16, to my full-time role, which I recruited for in the fall. Don't be in such a rush, I'd say, as a transfer. You can get what you want to get done in an extra year, then it's totally worth it, especially in light of where recruiting's at today, if you don't feel like you can get to the job that you want. Now, if you can go into one job and then leverage that to the next thing, which Arvin's been really successful at doing, then like that's still a totally great option as well. But I wouldn't think it's the end of the world if you don't end up exactly where you want or get what you want exactly in an internship or a full-time.
Right. Yeah. I just have a quick follow-up question. Do you feel like that affected recruitment or anything in any way by taking the extra time? Because I know a lot of transfers are looking to do that instead of, piling up too many courses in one quarter. So like, do you feel like that affected you negatively in any way, or was it pretty much the same experience?
In terms of taking quarters off?
Or taking extra time or taking time off, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can spread your classes out and just do classes. That's great. For me, I didn't have the financial option of just doing extra quarters to pick up an extra major or a minor. And so, I didn't really want to take on debt. So I found a way to basically self-finance a study abroad, if you will. If you've ever been to Miami, you'll understand that a little better. But that's kind of how I did it, to kill time so I could get more internships under my belt to get me where I wanted to post-grad. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. I had a great time in that internship. Did I miss out on some senior year experiences because I wasn't living in LA when my friends were doing the very end of college? For sure. And then I met new people and had, kind of a second, a fifth year, if you will, the second time around, and had, new and great experiences that year. So it's all trade-offs, and it just matters kind of what's important to you and what you want to, accomplish in your time at college.
Okay, got it. Yeah, thanks. And then Bhargavi, if you want to talk about a little bit about that, balancing both.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much just going to echo with what Kyle and Arvin said along those lines. School is very important. Your GPA does matter. It matters more for certain sectors than others, but at the end of the day, it matters. But that said, recruitment also is very important, and I felt like there were a couple people, not a good amount of people who didn't take it seriously as well. And if you have kind of three avenues you can spend your professional and academic life time in, you can spend it all in school 100%, all in recruitment, or spread it out and do a lot of your time in clubs. And I would say I agree with Kyle on that. Clubs are important. They help you and they teach you some valuable skills, but you can always learn a lot of skills on your own as well. And if you're pressed for time, I would say, your academics, your grades, and then recruitment is really important. And I kind of did it, I wouldn't say what I did is the best possible thing, because when I was recruiting, that was like my number one priority. And, I wouldn't say that's the best approach. Definitely, focus on your grades. Don't let your GPA drop during that time. But in the end of the day, you're going to school to get a job, right? So you want to make sure you're putting in that amount of time and that effort and that dedication and, prepping for those interviews as much as you can so that you could get the job that you want to get.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So kind of going off of that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about a lot of times with transfers, when it comes to interviews with companies for internships, jobs, whatever it is, there's a little bit of a stigma against transfers versus students that have been there 4 years. Did you guys feel like you came across that? How did you overcome it? Anything that you would advise on that we could do to, put ourselves in a better place in that situation? Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, happy to jump on this one. Absolutely, is the answer to stigma around being a transfer in recruiting. It's the unfortunate truth, but the reality is community college was a lot easier than UCLA. You guys are probably all realizing that right now. Certainly it was for me. Maybe people are smarter than me, but it was really challenging, right? So people are going to take that into consideration. I would say, on your resume, drop community college off of it. You're at UCLA now, and you're going to get the same diploma that the four-year students are going to get. So that's going to be the best way to get you competitive in the resume stack. As much as, I don't want to say lose sight of where you come from. I think for me, community college had to drop off my resume for a couple of years until I established myself a little bit more. And now it's like, I'll tell anyone I went to community college and I'll put it back on my resume because I don't care anymore. And you've got more on top of that to build your credibility as a candidate. But that's probably step number one. And then two, you really need to go out and get involved on campus or get something extracurricular. I was running a photography business at the time, doing wedding and lifestyle photo and video. And so I had kind of a non-academic piece that I could put on my resume as well that wasn't tied to my community college. But if all your extracurriculars are tied to community college, you need to go out and get something at UCLA or a job or otherwise that you can kind of fill in that leadership piece with for when you take community college off. People are going to be receptive to it. I'm more receptive to it because I was a transfer, and I think that population of transfers in our fields is growing rapidly. We've got other UCLA transfers now that have come to work for us at Intrepid and are doing great, which I think is destigmatizing, but it's still for sure there. So you gotta play the cards the best that you can.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I know a lot of times it's like hard to figure out, whether you're playing your cards to that someone can relate to you, maybe if you're putting that on your resume, or it might hurt you. So I guess it can kind of go either way, but yeah, no, that's great advice. Bhargavi, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to at least the corporate finance tech space, I can speak very well for that. There isn't too much of a stigma. I think tech is pretty nice in the sense where they really don't care about, where you came from. They just care about how much you know and if you can pass the interviews. Obviously, like because all of us have UCLA on our resumes, it's going to help. But I remember when I was applying for Intel and just a bunch of other tech companies, I had my CC on my resume and I still got interviews and I was fine. So I think it's more prevalent in some other sectors of finance. But in terms of corporate finance, I don't think I've had an issue. But, it still, I guess, helps to have more UCLA experience and more experience that's disconnected from your CC.
Right. Okay. Got it. And Arvin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd echo Kyle. The stigma definitely exists, unfortunately. So I had my community college on my resume when I applied out of undergrad. Think that probably handicapped me a little bit. I had friends that were a year under me that, smartly left it off. I think probably had better success. So Kyle, smart on you for thinking about that. And I think if you want to, I think you could still leave it on, right? Depending on what you're trying to go into in general. But I had a really good story as to why I went to community college, and I had, told it with conviction, but that was only once I got in the room, right? So as a gating item, it can be kind of contentious. So like, I don't know, if you were to ask me if I were to redo it again, would I leave it off? Probably would, if you're recruiting for a very competitive
I would
field.
agree with you on that. I'd say I wouldn't shy away from it in an interview if somebody asked me about it or your background and experience, but it cuts you out from the resume screen perspective.
Exactly. And I would say, so even when I was interviewing for the firm I am now, in Terry's, I pulled it off, I believe, but I still got the question from one of the people who was interviewing me, like, hey, just noticed that you were at UCLA for only 2 years. Like, tell me about that. So I think moral of that is just have a story as to why you went to community college. And, the more compelling or the more, detail you give in terms of, there's a reason for it, whether it be financial or it's a choice or you graduated early, you were crushing high school, so you left early. Like, those are all great stories to tell, right? So I just say, like, have a good story prepared that you can tell. And Janu, to your point, like, if you actually get in that room and discuss it, it can be a point of, commonality with someone potentially. But I in hindsight, I'm leaning a little more towards Kyle's approach.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. That's some great advice. Thank you. Yeah, so then I wanted to talk about, as far as like, your undergraduate courses, a lot of times, you take those courses to get a degree, but that doesn't necessarily prepare you for your job. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what were some other things that you might have done that prepared you to actually do the job you were going to do, whether that was, certification courses or other things you got involved in. Yeah, Kylie, go ahead.
Man, I would say very few of your classes are going to be relevant to your job. Maybe other people will disagree with me, but a couple of the management classes, 120A, 120B, 124 financial statement analysis is probably the most relevant, maybe 180 for like real estate valuation. And I know there's more Bruin value, or not a Bruin, but there's a value investing in the entrepreneurship minors, which theoretically have good classes in them, but those predate me or post-date me. Econ is pretty irrelevant to your job. It's your ability to do math and hard, problems and think critically. I felt the same way about English, and I thought it was more interesting. And so I switched my major from econ to English after my first quarter transfer year. And I've found it to be pretty productive as a skill set in my job today, but I don't think classes are really going to get you there in terms of an interview. And I don't think really certifications or any of those boot camps or anything else is really going to teach you what you're going to need to know for the job. They really teach you, something else that's equally as important, which is how to pass the interview and get the job. And at that point, it's really just studying. They've got it's going to be industry specific, so everyone can speak to theirs. But, there's the investment banking guide from Vault or mergers and acquisitions and different things that help you pass the interview to really demonstrate, at least now as an interviewer, I'd say demonstrate that you're interested enough in my profession that you went out of your way to study the interview. Knowing that I'm going to have to teach you how to do the job when you get here anyways. So.
Yeah, so as an English major, those classes probably helped you a lot in the job that you're at. But I just wanted to know, when you were at UCLA, did you take any other courses that weren't a part of your major that might have, helped as well, or?
So yeah, when I transferred as business economics with a minor in accounting, probably like most people on this call, because I wanted to go into finance. I think I just realized pretty quickly that I didn't really enjoy economics, and I didn't think it was applicable. This is probably a controversial topic because a lot of econ majors on the phone, but I just figured if I didn't enjoy it and it didn't have application, then there was really no reason to be in it. So I kind of just looked at the list of UCLA majors and was like, what's the next most justifiable in a finance interview that I will also enjoy? And again, it goes back to Arvin's point about having a story. As long as you got a story around it, same as community college, it works. So you go into an interview for finance with an English degree, they're going to ask you some hard quantitative questions to make sure that you actually understand the finance and math. And if you know it, then they're like, great, he can think critically, he can write, he can do all the things that we don't like to teach on the job. And you're kind of good from there. But as long as you have a story around it, then I think you can really major in anything. But it's an uphill battle and not the path that necessarily everyone should take.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Bhargavi, you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in terms of prepping for interviews and kind of bridging that gap between school and your career, I do understand that, yeah, there is a gap. I really wish we had, an undergraduate business program or more classes that helped facilitate that gap. Yeah, kind of echoing what Kyle said about at least coursework, I felt like the accounting classes, you don't need to get a full-on accounting minor unless you want to go into audit or something like that. But at least taking the basic accounting classes, I'm sure all of you guys have already taken, like 1A, 1B, and then 120A. I personally stopped at 120A. I think a lot of the stuff that's specific to interviews, you can also teach yourself through all the online, they have manuals for every sector that you want to get into. When it comes to internship recruitment and, prepping for those roles, at least on a corporate finance standpoint, they kind of know that, they don't expect you to know everything. And honestly, you're not as big of a liability. If you suck, you're only there for like 2-3 months, whereas full time, if you're not good at your job, you're a big liability. They already hired you, you're there. So in terms of internships, I felt like, just those accounting classes, that helped me quite a bit. And then in terms of corporate finance, at least if you're interested in any of like the companies working in-house, reading the 10K report and actually really understanding what the company's doing, where they're at financially, how, what their long-term goals are, and just being really passionate about that. Like I noticed that really helped me out. And they're a bit impressed because honestly, a lot of people who even work at these companies in-house finance, corporate finance, a lot of them don't even read the 10K reports. So if you have that background, that helps a lot. And, just making sure your Excel's fine. And this is very, sector specific, but in the end of the day, at least for internships, that's what really helped me out.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And then Arvin, go ahead.
Yeah, not to reiterate too much, accounting, good stuff to take. I was a math econ major, so did not need to take much accounting, so that, anything that I did was kind of above and beyond that. I'd say, to Bhargavi's point, like the accounting you're going to need, depending on what type of job and you get in finance, is pretty narrow outside of if you're actually going to work for a CPA firm. So it's really just basically the basic understandings of, how the three statements work together, how to analyze them. So, don't need to get the full minor, completely echo that. The one class that I really thought was helpful, honestly, probably more helpful than some of the econ classes, was business law. I know, Bhargavi, you mentioned you took that. That class was just so great. And I think just from like an analytical standpoint, it teaches you how to think about like two parties that are having different interests and, what was the resolution. And that's a lot of what, doing deals and doing businesses. So I really like that. And, so really recommend it. It's also just a very interesting course, not hard to study for because you're so interested in the coursework. And to Kyle's point, totally agree. If you can leverage resources, whether Wall Street Oasis, Vault Guide, et cetera, whatever, just to prep for the interviews, those are extremely helpful. But yeah, no extra certifications or outside coursework per se. I know that stuff's available, and if you have the resources, time, money to do that, definitely wouldn't hurt. But not something I did.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I would go so far to say if you have like that training the street boot camp on your resume, we don't put a whole lot of value or weight into that, just because all you had to do was spend money to do it, I'd say. But other people might put weight in it. I mean, if you have no internships and you're a comm major and that's the only way that you can get the words investment banking on your resume, it might be valuable. But if you have relevant experience, if you have a relevant major, there's not a whole lot of weight in things that you pay for.
Right. Okay, got it. Yeah, so then as far as like your time at UCLA, what were any like programs or organizations you were a part of that you felt like, obviously aside from recruitment that helped you, helped prepare you for these kinds of experiences? I know a couple of you were part of this organization. Hopefully it was helpful to you back then. But anything else, or even just this, if you want to talk about that. Raghavi, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was part of Net Impact Consulting. It's a social impact consulting for club. I almost said firm. And it wasn't directly applicable to, what I do my day-to-day at Intel, but it definitely gave a good foundation. I think consulting is really cool and interesting in the sense where it teaches you how to think, it teaches you how to approach problems, it teaches you how to look at things strategically, how to solve an issue. And also I just met some of the most genuine, brilliant people at UCLA through that club. I have a great network through that club. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but for all the incoming transfers, a lot of the clubs at UCLA in terms of business tend to be a bit exclusive, which I found out the hard way, and it does kind of suck. But in terms of Net Impact Consulting, I don't know if this is still the case, but at least when I was there, it's not super exclusive to only people who are traditional, and they want a diverse club, because consulting, the more perspectives you have, the better strategy you have in the end of the day. So I personally really liked that club, and I know there was a comment about how to create social impact with business, and that was actually a great club to do that, because I was learning all the skills, but I was all the day we were helping a tangible company, a social enterprise, with their strategic issues, whether that was marketing, anything else. So I really liked that club.
Got it. Okay, great. Arvin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this club and its former iteration, I was there like the first 6-ish months it was put together, was called Business Transfer Network back then. I like this name much better. Kudos to you guys. I thought that was great just from a standpoint of learning to communicate with people outside of UCLA in a professional setting. Kyle mentioned like soft skills earlier. That's super important. Learning how to communicate with people that, are super busy on a day-to-day basis, like respond to them quickly, accommodate to them, and learning that communication skill is a lot different than, just informal communications with family and friends. So that was a huge pro for that. Also verbal communication, getting on the phone and like organizing events with them. So I'd say any club really doesn't even have to be super business focused. As long as you're in a position in that club where you're doing something, you're not just a member, and you can speak to it in an interview. Again, just this theme of creating a narrative to the person who's interviewing you. That's what's important. They ask you, what'd you do at this club? Oh, I coordinated with, the school's budget or our budget and reached out to people outside, set up events, et cetera. They want to see that you have some experience in communicating and executing on a plan or a project or something to that nature.
Got it. All right. Yeah, thank you. And then Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, so I basically did all of that at community college. I was president of our equivalent of a business club. It was called the Accounting, Finance, and Management Club, and spent a lot of time in kind of, club leadership roles and guest speakers and budget and all that stuff that Arvin just mentioned. So by the time I got to UCLA, I think Bhargavi mentioned 3 buckets of what you can focus on: academics, recruiting, and clubs. I was so underwater between academics and recruiting, which I put such a heavy emphasis on recruiting that I didn't really have time to do club leadership at UCLA. So I dabbled in a few things. I was in the Daily Bruin for a little while. I was on homecoming committee for a little while. But really the only club that I got super engaged in was crew, not rowing, but campus ministry. And that was pretty formative for me at UCLA and is a big part of what I do today, and really kind of the importance of faith and how it's guided my principles now as an advisor the last several years. So that was the most kind of involved I was in a club on campus.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah, so shifting back over a little bit to interviews and all of that, I just wanted all of you to share your perspective on the timeline of applications, how you personally prepared for interviews, what was the best way to study for them, you know, who did you practice with, things like that, just to prep for interviews, because of course that's really important. So yeah, if you just want to share a little bit about that. Arvin, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of timeline, the earlier the better. I mean, just keep viewing Bruin View or a Handshake, as it might now be called. Just keep searching that stuff like the second you get on campus. And it takes a lot of time to flip through those pages, but you'd be surprised how early recruiting started. I'm sure Kyle can speak to this too, but in finance, the recruiting window keeps moving up further, earlier and earlier and earlier. I mean, I think to the point now where full-time interviews are happening like 2 months before they were when I was recruiting like 5 years ago. So it's just basically there's no such thing as too early. So that's from a timing perspective. From a prep perspective, we mentioned some of those, those courses, those are paid options, but really just you got to get online and really just dig around, Glassdoor, Wall Street Oasis, whatever. Try and find experiences from people that have been in these interviews before. If you know someone, if you're in a club or your dorm, fraternity, your sorority, et cetera, that has, been through something similar, pick their brain. But so those were more specific for like that questions you might be asked from a style of interview. To Bhargavi's point, you really want to know the firm extremely well, right? So don't just, know their name and then know that, they, what they do at a high level. Search Google News, know who their CEO is. I was asked who the CFO of JP Morgan Chase was in my interview, right? Like not Jamie Dimon, but like Marianne Lake at the time, who's not a public figure. So you got to like know random stuff. So do your work on the company. And if you got a lot of interviews, if you're lucky enough to be in that position, it's going to be a lot of work, but really do the work and see, what they're in the news for recently, what are their strategic initiatives, things of that nature, because that will show that you actually want to work at that company if you spent the time to do that.
Right. Okay. Definitely. Kyle, if you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, I don't have I guess a ton to necessarily add, other than prep a lot, prep early, and I would maybe just kind of take a different angle to add to it, and say don't feel bad when you don't get something. When you're a student, and you don't really appreciate this until you come to the other side, but I'm fairly heavily involved in our recruiting efforts at Intrepid for both summer analyst and analyst. And in my day-to-day, my last priority, I've got my deals, I've got my industry teamwork, I've got projects, I've got my social life, and then it's like getting you a job. And your priorities are completely inverted, right? Like you're in your junior year and you're thinking my priorities are get a job, then get good grades, and maybe switch, but that was mine. And then social life, and then whatever else, right? And so there's this disconnect that causes you to be disheartened and feel bad when you don't get jobs and when you don't get interviews. But you have to realize when people aren't responding, that gentle follow-up, recognizing people are super busy. It's going to change by industry, but certainly for Arvin and me in our industries where people are working 80 plus hours a week, as an analyst or even sometimes higher up in the chain, it's at the bottom of your priority list. Not that we don't care, and I love to give back to UCLA and mentor and talk to people too, but there's only so many hours in the day. So To give you like some context, for example, we're doing our summer analyst recruiting right now. We got and this is a particularly competitive year. I'd say 2020 is the most competitive year because supply is threefold increased because everyone can go to more schools because it's all virtual, and demand has gotten cut in half because most people aren't recruiting like we still are. A lot of banks have cut back on their hiring. In 3 weeks, we've gotten over 300 resumes, and that's for 5 to 6 positions for summer analysts. We just filled our full-time class. We hired 3 additional because we had 3 intern conversions. So we had 3 spots, and we had close to 250 resumes for that. And we had it open 2 weeks. So it's super competitive. Networking is going to be key. And I think we're getting into that later, but again, it's not, you just got to keep shooting, and it's really a numbers game of network as much as possible, apply as much as possible, and get out there and meet people.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then Barkavi, if you had anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle and Arvin pretty much hit it on the nail. It is a numbers game. Yeah, don't take it personally. I know people who've applied to like hundreds of internships before they got one. It's and these are like talented people as well. It's just a numbers game, and it really depends on how the job market is the time that you're applying. But I would say, yeah, regardless of industry, apply as early as possible. I know for at least tech and corporate finance. August, September, this is like peak season, all of fall quarter. Some of them seep into early winter quarter. I feel like once you reach spring quarter, that's when it's really slim pickings. You're not going to be getting a lot of, you're not going to be seeing that many options. And yeah, in the end of the day, also have a recruitment buddy. That helps a lot. And it's pretty easy to find. So you just honestly, if you don't have any friends in econ, just randomly message one of your friends during a Zoom call and be like, hey, or just a random person in your class, be like, hey, I'm recruiting. Are you recruiting? Let's be buddies and let's interview together and prep together. And that helps a lot because you have someone who's doing the same thing, going through the same thing as you. So you can rant to them. You have a rant buddy, you have a prep buddy. You just have someone who has your back and you have their back, and that's also how you make the best connections and the best friends, and just being genuinely interested in not only helping them, but also helping yourself. And it's kind of a give and take. And yeah, that helped me a lot. And also just I remember when I first started UCLA, I had a moment where I was freaking out and I was like, wow, I am so behind in terms of internships. I barely have any experience. And I honestly utilized the Facebook transfer group. And I basically said my spiel. I was like, hey, I want tips basically. And a bunch of transfers who transferred in a year before me responded. And I had so many one-on-ones and just informational phone calls. We ended up being really good friends. And, there's still somewhat mentor friends that I have, just find people who are in positions that you want to be in, or they just have cool experience, or just they have something that you're interested in, and just hit them up. And most people, I feel like the UCLA community, especially the alumni, they're very, very open and very nice and very helpful. I've never really encountered an alumni who's like, no, I'm not going to help you, screw you. They're pretty nice. So those are all the tips, the additional tips that I can give, but Arvin and Kyle pretty much covered the basics.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. And then going back to what Kyle was talking a little bit about earlier, networking, of course, is really important, but with the whole situation going on right now, networking is obviously a little bit more difficult. So I just wanted to know, do you guys have any tips on what we can be doing right now differently or still doing regardless of the pandemic? But yeah, just tips on that in general. Yeah, Arvin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say, before all of this, people would reach out to me via email and just either ask to get on the phone for an hour. And then, if things went well and they wanted more advice, I was happy to meet up with them and grab coffee, right? But that second step doesn't necessarily have to happen now. I say still reach out to people. To Bhargavi's point, time permitting, most people are going to be willing to want to help out other UCLA students. So, and frankly, for vanity, some people like to talk about themselves. So, you're probably going to get a high hit rate once people have time to actually talk with you. So be persistent. As Kyle said, don't take it personally. People don't follow up. You're grinding crazy hours, that your personal email is the last thing you check maybe before you go to bed. And just follow up with that gentle reminder. And I think just still keep reaching out, try to set up phone calls, maybe do a Zoom call. It'd be a first for me, but I would certainly be open to it if someone had questions and wanted to chat more. But yeah, it's also a numbers game there. Got to reach out to a lot of alumni to see where their experiences and their availability lines up with yours.
Okay, definitely. Yeah. Bhargavi, if you wanted to share.
Yeah, kind of echoing that. Also, a slight addendum. Yeah, I completely agree with Arvin and Kyle in the sense where, as long as you're cognizant and mindful of the other person's time and you try to be as respectful, if you set up a meeting at 5, you show up at 5, you're prepared. People are generally pretty open and receptive to that. And yeah, it does suck in the sense where, there is a lot of value to just having those in-person classes, sitting next to someone, introducing yourself, getting to know them. There's a lot of value to that. But regardless, I mean, utilize the internet, use the Facebook transfer group, ask like, hey, who's in 106F? And then make a little study group, just get to know people as well as you can, given the resources that you have. And yeah, if you can't meet up, in person for coffee or anything, just email them, just get on a call, and that still goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Kyle, anything else?
Yeah, if anything, I would say 2020 has made everyone realize what networking should be. There's kind of this misnomer around networking, right? You think of like networking when you first started community college, and it's like going to some industry association, and there's like, some old dude holding a cocktail that like has been a wealth manager for 50 years. Like that's not networking. And getting his business card, like who cares about business cards or meeting people in person even? Like that's just not how networking works. And I think that was something that I didn't fully appreciate until I got to UCLA. And 2020 and the world that we're living in today has only exacerbated that and made it real to people that they can network without going to mixers, whether that's on campus with, students or at these other events that you find in the city. You really like a company, and off cycle, right? You email Arvin because he's a UCLA alum and you want to know about the lending side or something that he came from, or he's a transfer. You can kind of connect with them. That first email should be super short. Get to your point. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a job? Do you want to know my story so you can learn my background to know how you can do it? Are you a transfer? Whatever it is, 2 to 3 sentences. If you send me a 3-paragraph email, it's going to take me a long time to respond, or I might not ever get to it because it just gets buried in my inbox trying to get back to it. But if you're really to the point and you say, hey, Kyle, I'm a UCLA transfer. I'm struggling to get a job right now and want to learn from your experiences. Do you have 15 minutes to hop on the phone? That's what networking is. And getting that 15 minutes with me. And then 6 months from now saying, hey, I got some off-cycle internship at a little wealth management shop in Westwood. Would love to hear some tips from you on how to make the most of it. We get on another 15-minute call. You do enough of those. We have enough relationship now that by the time you get to, wanting a job from me, there's some familiarity there. Now, all that to say, you're already juniors at least as a transfer. So you're disadvantaged because you don't have that super strong lead time to do it. You can still network though, because whatever your internship is, if you don't get a return offer or you don't like it, you're going to have to re-recruit next year. And it helps to have already started to develop those relationships. But I just want to be clear that like networking is 3-sentence emails, 3-sentence emails. If I don't respond, it's a 1-sentence follow-up trying to get me to respond. If I don't respond to that, it's a 3rd at most follow-up again with another 1 sentence, and then it's a 15-minute call, and a series of those over the course of 3 to 6 months.
Okay, got it. All right, yeah, that's great advice. So now kind of jumping into more your jobs and what your day-to-day job looks like. I kind of wanted to hear, when you first went into your company, was it a very intimidating environment, or was it relatively easy to kind of get a grasp of what your role was, and just kind of talk a little bit about your day-to-day role in your job. I know it's different for you guys because some of you have been there for longer. But yeah, just talk a little bit about that if you'd like. Yeah, Bhargavi, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, I actually interned at the company that I'm working at now. So, in terms of intimidating, I got a little lucky in the sense where I already knew a lot of people. And it was great because I met them face to face during my internship because that was pre-COVID. So, that was nice. But I mean, regardless, starting any job is intimidating. You don't know everything. There's so much that school doesn't prepare you for. I mean, there's also just so many things that school literally cannot prepare you for. It's very specific to just your job. So in terms of ramping up and just getting familiarized with the new job, it's just asking those questions, understanding that, hey, I don't know everything, and that's fine, and that's the point, and I'm going to learn it as the months progress. And in terms of my day-to-day, that's a little tricky because it's very different depending on when you ask me. So I'm in corp planning and reporting. So our team, I'm an OpEx spending analyst for it. So I handle everything OpEx spending related, total intel level. So it's about $18 billion in just total spending. But yeah, during close time, the 9 to 5 is out the window. I'm on call all the time, and I do various activities when it comes to data analysis, data accuracy, using that data and creating, a story behind it, creating a strategy that we send to a deck, which is sent to the CFO. So it is quite busy during that time. But then we have off time, and that's kind of where the consulting background comes in handy. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing during that off time is just different strategic projects, different process improvement projects. It's just different, somewhat consulting projects that I'm doing. So during that time, it's pretty nice. It's a nice work-life balance, 9 to 5. And yeah, it really just varies on the cycle.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd say there's kind of two ways to answer this question. One is tangibly what's up on my computer screen all day long, and what my day looks like, and then kind of at a higher level. At a kind of micro level, what are you actually doing all day? I'd say as an analyst, when you first start, it's probably 40% PowerPoint, 40% Excel, 10% research, and 10% administrative. This is just from our bank specifically, which is more bootstrapped and entrepreneurial. It could be different at other banks. Now my job has evolved, a little bit more, and I'd say I probably do 30-30 in PowerPoint and Excel instead of 40-40. And, another 30% of my time is talking to investors on the phone, people like Arvin on debt deals, and guys that invest in equity, or strategic corporations like Bhargavi on tech deals, to wrangle kind of buyers for companies that we're selling or pitching investment in. And then some portion of kind of, maybe 5 and 5 on research, and then business development, doing prospecting. What that actually looks like is spending a lot of time creating the story around an entrepreneurial business to help them sell it, to get an emotional price. And I've always loved this part of the job. Not everyone loves it. Some people like to find true efficiencies in the market and be very quantitative. I used to be a wedding photographer, like I mentioned, and anytime someone makes an emotional financial decision, it's good business. And that's what we try and do. We try and get people to make emotional financial decisions, to say, I have to own this business. And when we can do that, they pay too much, and we've done our job for our client, and helped an entrepreneur realize an exit on their life's work, their baby. And so that's kind of what I love about it, and what the day-to-day looks like, I'd say pragmatically, but also at a high level.
Great. Yeah. Very interesting. Okay. Yeah. Arvin, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah. So the first point on, is it intimidating when you start? I say maybe there's a little bit of that, especially if you're going to a large company, you want to obviously do a good job, and might be some prestige with a firm or whatever. But I think if you find, especially, most of these analyst classes are very structured and organized, where you have an incoming analyst class, you give it a couple of weeks, you either go through a training program, whether your company takes you to a different city and does a training program, or you do it where you are, you become best friends with your peer group. The job gets a lot less intimidating. I mean, there's always pressure depending on, what you're working on. All these jobs have very high profile deliverables. Bargavy's delivering stuff to the CFO. Kyle is advising people on the sale of their business that they spent their life, doing, and for, large sums of money. Like, it's important work. So there is some pressure there, but I think what can reduce that is the friendships you make with not only your peers and the people above you, but also, as you start to get more confidence and feel better about yourself, that goes off over time. So that's a little bit on the intimidation side. And, I'd say don't be too worried. On my day-to-day, so I work in leverage finance. What that means at a high level is, in a transaction called a leverage buyout, which I'm sure many of you are learning about, or either through recruiting or through your accounting classes, a private equity firm will buy a company that, say, Kyle is selling in market. And when they are looking to acquire that business, let's say the purchase price of the business is $1 billion. They will put in some of their own money, say half of it, realistically it's less, and then the rest of the purchase price they need to borrow. And that borrowing part is where my part of the equation is. The exact analogy to this is when you buy a home, you have your down payment, that would be the private equity firm, and then you borrow the rest from a bank. That would be my part of it. So my job, about 20% of it is managing companies where we've already closed the transaction. They're in our portfolio already. It's just keeping up to date on their performance, their quarterly performance, talking with management, see how things are going, how are they faring during COVID, things of that nature. And it's actually become a little more elevated recently because a lot of companies aren't doing so great, as you can imagine, during COVID. But normal time, it's about 20% of my job. And the remaining 80% is evaluating new investment opportunities. So Kyle will spend weeks putting together a pitch book, and I'll get it on my desk from one of our private equity clients saying, hey, here's this business that's for sale. We're interested in buying it. How much debt will you give us? What are the terms behind that debt, et cetera, et cetera. And my time will be evaluating that investment opportunity, saying, do I like this company? Do I not like this company? What is the industry they're playing in? Is it growing, flat, declining? Assuming I actually like the company based on a thorough level of analysis, it's then determining how much debt.
And the compelling story we put together.
Oh, I laugh so much when you said that, because that's my job to cut through that. Kyle's going to come in there and tell me that the business is worth this much, and I got to say, maybe not. So I got to remove some emotion from it. Sometimes I get compelled though, and I'll do irrational things. But that's the second part of it, and taking all that and synthesizing it and putting it, you're writing approval memos often to take to investment committee, get approval, pitch to committee. That's a lot of the time. So a lot of it's doing the research and evaluating, modeling, industry research, et cetera. But then it's synthesizing that data and putting it into a presentation form to ultimately present in front of a committee and hopefully receive approval to go and do the deal.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So kind of going off of that then, I know we touched on this a little bit earlier. I just wanted to know, what are some of the technical skills that you learned in college that you're actually using for your job? Like what level of math are you using? Anything from your econ classes, accounting classes that might have been useful? If you just wanted to talk a little bit about that, just technical skills actually carried over. Kyle, go ahead.
Not a ton. I don't even know if I want to spend a whole lot of time on this question, because it's like not a whole lot carries over. You basically learn it all on the job. There's some like residual like nostalgia of like, oh, I think I remember that from Gardner's class. But yeah, that's basically it. You learn it on the job. Everything that you're studying should be how to learn, or I guess proves out that you know how to learn, that you work hard, and that's basically it. And then you can pass the interview test. That's that expresses interest.
Right. Yeah. What about you guys? Bhargavi, is there anything that you felt like carried over?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of the stuff you just learn on the job. I mean, I know that there's an R class now. They actually just created it. It's like an addition to 103. They just created it when I graduated, so I missed out on that. But I mean, regardless, I don't use R on a daily basis. I think it's just a cool skill to have like under your belt. I think just in general though, cool, like very, I guess the useful classes that I still remember and I still kind of touch on when I'm doing my job, or not even in my job, but just in general, if you're trying to start your own business or just in general. As much as the business law class, I was doing 13-hour days of dense legal reading and didn't want to be a lawyer after that. I thought it was really interesting in the sense where I learned a ton of information. And if I ever wanted to start a nonprofit or my own business, I'd pretty much know, what to avoid at least. And I know a lot about contracts now, which is always fun. And then in terms of at least the tech space, I took an economics of technology class. That was amazing. We did just a bunch of case studies. It was very applicable. And I don't use that in my career on a day-to-day basis, but I just think it's interesting if in those strategic positions, you have examples to touch off on. You have what Yelp did, what they did wrong. So I think just in terms of classes, those were fun, interesting, cool classes that you can definitely take after you've taken all your required classes. But I wouldn't say there's any like concrete technical skills that I learned during UCLA that I need for my job right now. I learn a lot of it on the job.
Okay, got it. Yeah, as expected, that makes sense. And then Arvin, anything
Yeah.
else? You're pretty
No,
much
no,
the
nothing to add.
same
Learn
thing.
Excel to the best of your ability. That won't be in a class, just on your spare time. That's it. Yeah, I don't use anything.
You learn the soft skills.
Yeah. That's basically it. I don't use infinite dimensional math that I learned in school in work at all. It's at multiplication, division, like subtraction. I'm sure I missed some.
Algebra 2.
Yeah, that's it. You're good.
Sophisticated algebra. I'll give it a good adjective.
Okay. Yeah. And then also for everyone who's watching the panel right now, if you guys wanted to start sending your questions into the chat, now would be a good time. We have a few more things we want to talk about, but so that way we have them when we're finished here. So the next question I want to talk about was how's the work-life balance in your jobs? I'm sure it's changed since you first got to the company to where you are now. But just a little bit about, how many hours you're spending at work, how that affected your lifestyle, all of that. Kyle, go ahead.
I have to go first?
If you want.
I want somebody, I'm just kidding. It's challenging. I think people say work-life balance. I don't know. I don't love that term per se. Maybe that's the investment banker in me, but I don't know that it's necessarily a balance. It's like whatever you want, right? And this is kind of what I wanted, is a fast-paced environment. I enjoy this, right? My job is my job, and it's my, hobby as well. In terms of, if you actually have to like what you do, right? The people who don't like it leave. But yeah, analyst life is challenging. I think it's also very social. When you join an analyst class at a bank versus going to work at another company, like, I don't know, I felt like when I was 21, I just graduated UCLA. What else was I going to do at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, And so you all go get dinner, you all work out, and then you come back to the office and you keep working again until 1 in the morning. And that's just kind of what it was like as an analyst. My life has gotten a little bit better and more flexible now, which is awesome, because I think we have a culture at our shop of, if you get and certainly now with nobody supervising you because you're remote, or around, it's all just, if you get your work done and nobody cares what you're doing, in between or after or before. So I think it's just at your preference and how much time that you want to do other things. And we still get, I kind of like to work hard, play hard. And so I like to work really long hours and then take time off and go, like, I feel like I come back from my vacation still yet even tireder. That's just kind of, my energy level, but not for everyone, for sure.
Okay, got it. Definitely. Arvin, go ahead.
Yeah, so mine fluctuates a decent amount. I'd say commercial banking, my first job, pretty consistently you're working like 50-hour weeks, maybe some 60 plus hours if you got a couple things going on. But in the work I am now, it's a lot less work-life balance, just given the nature of the transactions. Anytime you're supporting merger and acquisition activity or supporting private equity clients, they are, I'm sure Kyle can attest to this, very demanding and tight timelines. So it depends, right? So if I've got, 3 or 4 live deals going and they all need to go to committee, I mean, you could easily surpass an 80-hour week, and, you kind of just kind of drinking from the fire hose is the term. I think you'll hear it a lot. if you find yourself in a time where there's a lull in activity and you're not looking at a ton of new opportunities and your portfolio accounts are performing well, you are going to have a lot more flexibility and probably go closer to like a 50-hour week and maybe a lighter Friday for that. So it's a lot more ups and downs, but there's definitely the full spectrum of getting to those 14, 15, 16-hour days pretty consistently, and then other days you'll have a more conventional, or the periods, I should say, more conventional depending on deal flow.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just echo that piece and say it's 100% the same with us. And you just want to make sure you're going a place that isn't FaceTime driven and, like you have to prove yourself because I, was a pledge as well in this industry. And for us, it's like, if you leave at 5 and there's nothing to do, nobody's ever going to care what time you're not working as long as you're getting your work done. So I think that's important in cultural fit when you find an employer is really important.
Absolutely, especially in anything banking related, the culture is huge for that because I've been in offices where there's both, right? So if you're in an office where you can feel and you're visiting their office from the same firm you're at even, and it's on a by office basis, not even just the firm as a whole. If there's a bunch of really old school people and they want FaceTime for FaceTime's sake and that doesn't align with what you want to do, that's going to be tough, right? But if you're at a firm like Kyle's or your office, where I feel my office is like this, it's, did you get your work done? Did you meet your client's needs and your internal firm's needs? And there's no need for you to be there just to be there. So very dependent, and culture's a huge portion of that, especially with the fluctuation of hours. It's hard to sustain 100-hour weeks for, months at a time. So you need a firm that when you don't have that, you can easily take a, early day on a Friday or whatever it may be.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And then Barkavi, you had anything else?
Yeah. So, I agree in the sense where, okay, we nowhere near have the same hours. We have more of a 9 to 5. But during close time, it does get a little crazy. You're on call at all times. So if they need you, they need you. But yeah, I would say, in terms of just tech in general, they treat you pretty much like an adult. So if you're done with your work, you're done with your work, and you don't have to stay longer. You don't have to be there at exactly 8 or 9. No one's really watching your desk, or in this case, your chat log to see if you're online. And at least at Intel, and just from all of my friends who are working in tech, I've noticed that, they really encourage you to take your vacations. When you're at 5, at 6, if you don't have work, log off. Even if you are working, sometimes you can just log off from the chats and no one messages you after those hours. Just really setting those boundaries. There's a lot more flexibility, I guess, in this space where you can really set those boundaries. I've set a boundary where, I'll come in, unless I have a meeting at 8, I'll come in at 8, but if I don't, I'll come in at 9, and I'll be gone by 5 or 6, and then after that, I'll just check my emails the next day. So I guess it's also, I can't speak for banking, but at least in corporate finance, you kind of build that work-life balance yourself. You set those boundaries and you decide how much you want to prioritize it. Some people, if you want to work crazy hours, you can. People are all for it. You're just doing more work. People love that. But if you don't, you can also do that. So it's kind of that happy medium.
All right. Yeah. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for the questions that I wanted to ask you guys. I know we have a couple questions in the chat that some people have asked, so I'll kind of jump over to that. Also, I'm not going to direct these towards anyone. If you feel like you wanted to answer that, just go ahead and jump in and talk about that. So the first question I see is, did any of you study for your CFA certification?
I did not. I know there's some prevalence in that, and some people view it as an alternative to an MBA, which also is seeing lower rates of adoption recently. There's some people that do it and love the intellectual stimulation and the badge of honor, but I did not personally. Know many people that have and say good things. It's a very difficult exam. I know that for a fact. The pass rates are pretty low, but you do learn a ton, and can't say it would hurt you.
Right. Yeah. Anyone else or?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like most people, at least in my industry, have an MBA, not really a CFA, but you see those occasionally. It's not required whatsoever, but I know a lot of people have been using it as an alternative to an MBA, and I guess it's also kind of a cool group to be a part of. I know they have a bunch of events. There's a CFA Society of Los Angeles. There's one in SF. So some people do it. It really just depends on what industry you're in and if it requires it.
Okay. Yeah. And someone else.
Honestly, it's make or break. Maybe I'll just end with that. Like I don't think, unless you're doing like, maybe there's some quant positions or like some hedge fund jobs where it very specifically will require it for, when you're going out raising money, they want, it's very rare that, if you have two people that are equally, matched and one has a CFA, I don't think there's a ton of weight given to that. I just add that.
And I'd go even further and say, even if you have because as a student, you're getting level 1. If you have level 1 CFA on your resume and you passed it as a student, I'd be like, cool, but it's not like a huge differentiator unless, like Arvin said, you're going to apply for PIMCO or BlackRock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes if the person who's interviewing you has a CFA, like it'll be a cool kind of, you can talk about it and they might like you a little more, but I don't think it's required unless
it's a lot of work for a connection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So kind of going off of that, somebody else asked about if a master's degree would help your chances of getting a job. And I think just to add on to that a little bit, for those who are thinking of getting a master's degree, would you suggest, like how much time working before going to get that, or, going straight into it? If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I can actually speak on this. Depends on what the master's is. I'm assuming it's an MBA, and if it is an MBA, you should work for a bit. I've noticed and I've heard people who get MBAs straight out of undergrad, you don't really get a huge salary increase. You're not as marketable as if you have that industry experience and then you're getting an MBA. And a lot of people use an MBA to pivot. So like you can be, I guess, in corporate finance and you want to pivot to consulting, you can get an MBA and do that. Or if you want to pivot to product management, you can get an MBA. So it's a great pivot, or it's also really great to just help you get to that next level. It does make you a little more marketable from what I've heard, but it really just depends on the company. And in terms of getting a master's, like for example, master's in statistics or something like that, that's really useful if you want to go into data science or something like that, or data analytics. But I would say just regardless, if you're getting an MBA, you should have some working experience. And it also helps you understand what you want to get into. And if you still want to stay in the space you're in, or if you want to pivot, or if you want to move up, it gives you a greater understanding once you've actually done a job.
All right.
And I would just add one thing from a different perspective here, because, I think Bhargavi covered the MBA piece well. If you are talking about getting a master's because you can't get a job right now because of the 2020 meltdown, then a master's in finance could serve a really good extra year, equivalent to what I was saying earlier, which is taking an internship, pushing 2 quarters off to next year. If you want to get a master's in finance, that could be helpful to do that. Like Claremont's got a good program for that. Vanderbilt's got a good program for that. You're probably going to come in like at a place like us, we're going to probably put you in the same spot that an undergrad would come in. But if you're determined to get to banking, now and not 7 years later when you graduate from your MBA, it could give you an opportunity to re-up, intern recruit again, do a 1-year master's and try again.
All right. Yeah.
Whereas I wouldn't have necessarily recommended it in the past.
Okay.
But.
Okay. Yeah. And then our next question is from a freshman, and she's actually asking, as far as, so she said, I'm still exploring my career opportunities. What advice would you give to freshmen who lack the experience and are still unsure of what specific career path to choose? So I guess she's wondering how to prepare for a career. What can she be doing from a younger age?
Yeah, I would say kind of what we talked about earlier, go to all, again, I feel like it's tough to say go to all the career nights in the era of COVID. I don't know if they're doing replacements for those like virtually. Yeah, you need a network. So, look up in the Bruin alumni registry, do Facebook groups, as Bhargavi said, and just reach out to people, like we said, that they're going to be more than happy to get on the phone with you and give a quick chat as to what they do on a day-to-day basis. And that should be your determining factor as to whether you want to pursue it or not. Do you like the person you're talking to? Does what they describe to you as their day-to-day sound interesting? Does that profile fit what you want to achieve? Then you should go for it. But that's the best way to canvas it, as opposed to, reading stuff online and, thinking that you want to do an industry just because of, whatever other people might say about it. Learn for yourself and try and talk to people that actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
okay.
get good grades. It's more important in your first 2 years than your last 2. Get good grades.
Absolutely.
All right. So the next question says, So she basically wants to know, how do you succeed in getting your first internship if your resume has little to no relevant experience?
It's the same answer. Networking.
It
Yeah.
is.
Good grades and networking. It's the same answer, really.
And I would say completely agree with that. I would say, again, as a transfer, just apply to as many as you can. Cast a very, very wide net, understanding that the deck is stacked against you, unfortunately, but it's a harsh reality. I can't tell you how many internships I applied to get only a handful of interviews my junior year. I must have applied to hundreds. And, you don't have the luxury of being very selective. I'm of a very big mindset of, a lot about career and doing well is about momentum. So you got to keep the process moving. So if you don't get the internship you want for junior year, but it's an internship, go with it, take it, just do it. If you don't want to return, you can change your mind later, but, cast a very wide net and
move to Miami if you have to.
Exactly.
I had a friend, a quick anecdote. I had a friend who was struggling with this recently in terms of getting a job and felt pretty disheartened. And I went into my UCLA email and I said, and she wasn't anything in finance at all. It was a totally different sector. And I said, name a bank that you know. She's like, I don't know any bank. No, I said, just anything that you would go to a bank. Name a bank. She was like, Chase. And I'm like, great, Chase. And then I put in after Chase into my email search, Chase, and then in quotes, thank you for, because every rejection email starts with thank you. And there was like 4 rejections from different years. And I'm like, name another bank. And it was like, well, sorry. And it's like the same thing, because I'm sure Arvin's UCLA and Booger's UCLA emails all look the same way because you apply to everything and that's the only way you can get a job. So that's just kind of the name of the game.
Yeah. And honestly, also, when you don't have too much experience, it's really just getting your foot in the door and getting that first interview. And then the rest is up to you, right? So network with people and ask them for referrals. That's completely fine. And, obviously don't just ask it in a nice way, but that really helps because referrals do help you at least to get a foot in the door and at least get an interview. But yeah, in the end of the day, just network, and it's really just a numbers game.
Okay. Yeah. So we just have a couple more questions on this. Somebody asked, do you feel like your major influenced your ability to get interviews? I'm sure, Kyle, you have a lot to say about that.
Sounds like it was directed at me.
Yeah.
I don't know is the true answer. I changed my major to English. By the time I had done that, I already had an internship in commercial real estate banking at a small bank in Orange County, California Bank and Trust. And then I'd already done a commercial banking internship at a group in Santa Monica called One West Bank, which is now since been renamed to CIT after their acquisition. And so I had 2 internships already in finance. And what I did is I switched my major from econ to English, and I went to my resume and I took education from the top and I moved it to the bottom below experience. So when the recruiter's eyes were going down my resume, they saw banking, and then English. And then they were like, oh, well, banking came before English, so he's probably fine. So I don't know, if you switch your major to English as a freshman, how hard is it? Probably harder. We hire a lot of people from top schools who have non-traditional backgrounds, and in terms of major, we prefer it at Intrepid. It's just our kind of way. We like people who have the critical thinking skills, and we teach them the technical. But that's not every shop, and most are probably not like that. The higher school level you go to, the more elite your school, the less your major is relevant. If you go to a Cal State, you have to have a finance or business major. If you go to Harvard, you can be art history. Like, it just doesn't matter. That's just kind of the name of how it is in our industry, at least.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of that. And I'd say if you don't have a traditional, so I think, yes, your major does impact, your chances of getting screened in or out. If you have a non-traditional major, but you have relevant work experience like Kyle did, emphasize that and do as he did, make that the focus, because then, they might read that you are, history or English major or non-econ finance, whatever. Mm-hmm. But if they see the relevant experience, they're gonna be like, okay, never mind, they can do the job. And that's the primary focus, because they know that you're not going to be doing multivariable calculus in your investment banking job.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, and he can write too. Great.
Right.
Okay, got it. All right, so just about 2 more questions. This next one says, for investment banking, do you already have to be good in financial modeling? If yes, do you have any resources or websites to study for that?
also feels directed at me, so I'll take this one. But you don't need to be good at financial modeling. You just need to seem like you're good at financial modeling. And what I mean by that is you don't actually need to be able to build it in Excel. You just need to be able to give it, answer the question about how you would build it in Excel in order to get the job. So, as long as I ask you a financial statement question or evaluation question, and you can reason me through it or walk me through it, that's good enough for me. But I'm never going to give in. Some banks give case studies. I did some in college, but it's less common than, say, in management consulting, which you guys will learn about next week, where the case study is everything. It's really more, did you read enough to be able to answer the questions and understand how things work together? And in terms of resources, they're probably all the typical ones that you would get either in BTIB here or in UBS or in Bruin Value Investing or whatever the latest and greatest club is on campus for investment banking these days. But get it from other students. There's like the 400 question guide to investment banking put out by Mergers and Inquisitions. There's the Vault guide to investment banking. There's Wall Street Oasis. And honestly, between those three, and then there's Breaking into Wall Street too, and between those four, you can probably figure out how to answer interview questions. If you really need the investment banking guide of interview questions and you can't find it from a student or an on-campus group, I can email you the one from like 6 years ago. I don't think I have the updated one, but yeah.
Okay. All right. The last question I see in the chat is, what's the worst part of your job? What is your least favorite thing that you do? I think all of you can kind of answer this separately. So yeah, Arvin, you want to go ahead and answer that first?
Oh, I think it's, anytime you're in a company that's doing investing, whether it's on the debt or the equity side, you're going to have this portfolio management aspect of your job. And actually managing the company and understanding how they're performing isn't so much the difficult part. It's uploading financial results into like various systems, quarterly deadlines to, report on how the company's perform, kind of this more administrative type tasks. That's kind of, because at a high level, like if someone were to ask you like, hey, how's this company doing? And I could speak to it very clearly. That's not the problem. It's, filling out 3 different reports, for, this investor base or that investor base, that kind of stuff. The more administrative side, that's the more of the rub. The fun part of the job is looking at new deals and determining whether or not we want to do them. So that's my answer.
Got it. All right. Yeah. Barkavi, go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree. We work with a lot of data, and because of that, our systems tend to slow down. And that definitely is the worst part, because you're waiting for like sometimes 5 minutes just for something to load, or work through some file, or go through some process. And it's a lot easier if it was just like right off the bat. I can just answer that on the phone call, but I can't. So that's probably, I agree. That's pretty annoying.
All right. Yeah. Kyle, your least favorite part?
I was struggling to come up with something, but I think Bhargavi inspired me. The worst part about the job is the VPN, for sure. And that's been our life the last 6 months, right, is VPNing in it. We've got a couple upgrades, to our VPN in the last 6 months. They've been making it better and better every month. But in the beginning, for sure, it just made everything take twice as long. It's funny, Johnny, you had the last question on here is what's the favorite part of the job and why? And so I thought about that, and it almost answers the same question. But I feel like with every job, there's 3 things. There's, do you like what you're doing? Do you like who you're doing it with? And are they paying you well to do it, right? And, 2 out of 3 of those is great. And right now in my current role, I've got all 3. I really like the people that I work with. I really like the work that I'm doing, and, they pay us well to do it. And so when you put the 3 of those together, I think that's kind of what makes for a good job. Lacking any or all of those 3 would make it a bad job.
All right. Well, thank you. That pretty much wraps it up here. I don't see any other questions. So I just wanted to say thank you again to all of you for being a part of this. This is just like incredibly helpful to answer all these questions for us. And for the audience who is watching, thanks for joining us and supporting the club. Again, we're going to be here for the next 2 weeks at the same time with panelists in different industries. So, even if you're thinking you're more directed towards finance right now, you might change your mind later. So it would be helpful to show up to all the panels to even just get an idea of what you're more interested in. So yeah, thank you again to everyone. And just go ahead and visit our website so you can find our social media and mailing lists too. Thank you.
And I'll plug here at the end that our resume drop for summer internships ends Friday for anyone who's interested.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Great.
All
Thank
right.
you so much, guys.
Thanks, Janu.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a good one. Bye.